r/AskReddit. To those who have accidentally killed someone, what went wrong? This was a hockey accident when I was 19. I'm 36 now. I shot a low slap shot and there was a net battle and my friend on the other team got shoved, fell over and the puck hit him in his temple and shattered much of the structure. He died later because of the bone fragments in his brain. I stopped playing for a long time after that. Now I play men's league and wear his number. My best friend and I were unable to do anything for another friend of ours who fell on a climbing trip. We were desperate to help her, but there really wasn't much anyone could have done so far into the backcountry. We couldn't wake her up or move her safely, so we just kinda sat there. Eventually a helicopter came, but she was already brain dead by the time they got her to a hospital. It's been a few years since, and I ended up going to med school as a result, so now I know nothing could have been done. I still feel uncomfortable about it though. I was driving to play a co-ed soccer game at night. First snowfall of the year. Didn't even make it off my own street before suddenly seeing something under my headlights. Didn't have time to stop before hitting him. I don't know why he was lying on the road, but I do wish I had noticed him sooner, so that I could have asked. I don't know if it's the same. I did CPR on a guy who died. He was the first person I ever did CPR on. Since then, I've done CPR on an infant that died, a little girl that drowned, and she died. Then on a grown woman who lived. Not me, but a good friend. He was driving around a corner with a date, mid-afternoon, and the city had freshly mowed wet grass that got blown into the road by the riding lawnmower mulching instead of bagging. The car hit the wet grass on the road like a banana peel, understeered the corner, and he slid off the side and into a tree. All this while only doing 35 miles per hour, but the car hit the tree directly in the passenger side door, and a branch impaled her side. He said he sat there and watched her bleed out before the ambulance could show up. A crazy wasted guy broke into my house several years ago. He had a knife and was threatening me. My young son and I were the only ones home. I heard noise in my house and grabbed a baseball bat I keep under my bed and went to investigate thinking it was probably nothing. The guy came at me yelling incoherently and almost as a reflex I cracked on top his head with the bat. I think my adrenaline must have put more into the strike than I thought I was doing, and the guy dropped immediately. I called 911 and police arrived quickly, but he was already gone. Crushed skull. I still have nightmares fairly often, but can't picture how else it would have ended without me and possibly my son being attacked. Survival instincts are strong. This happened to my uncle back in the 1970s. He was coming home from work one night in a snowstorm and turned onto his road. His house was on the other side of a hill. He climbed the hill, and as he started descending the other side, he heard kids screaming and yelling. Brakes were useless. He ran over a 10-year-old kid who was sledding down the hill in the middle of the road and killed him. It was his next door neighbor. There was no charge against him. Nobody sued him because it was clear that it was a freak accident. Even the kid's parents told him it was not his fault. However, my uncle, 53 years old, a World War II USMC combat veteran of the Pacific War, previously strong-willed, clear-headed, and not a drinker, drank himself to death in less than a year. Tragic all the way around. I'm in the medical field. I know it doesn't technically count as killing someone, but failing to save someone due to lack of experience, inadequate reaction time, or even your choice of medication can sure feel like you killed someone. I clearly remember the first patient under my care who died unexpectedly. I ordered the standard care medication for him and even joked around with him on the way out of the door. 2 hours later I was in his room as part of the cardiac arrest team. He didn't make it. There were signs somebody more experienced than me at the time might have picked up that for this particular patient standard care wouldn't be enough. As an older colleague said, it gets easier to deal death over time, but the day it stops affecting you, you should stop practicing medicine. My wife has a friend who was driving and hit someone on a line scooter. The person was drunk and in the wrong lane. So my wife's friend wasn't at fault and didn't get charged with anything, but the experience was incredibly traumatizing, and last I heard she was going through therapy. I was maybe 16 and had planted a huge vegetable garden in our backyard. My grandma came over and I was super excited to show her since she absolutely loved plants and gardening. She comes over and started pulling weeds in my garden. One was especially hard to pull out and she fell backwards and hit her head on a paver stone. Had a brain bleed and was in a care home not knowing who anyone was and unable to walk or move her hands for the rest of her life. I technically didn't kill her, but I think the outcome was worse than death. Not me, but my stepdad about 2 weeks ago hit and killed someone on the road. For context, he is an overpass truck driver for a local company. The person he hit was attempting suicide via highway and my stepdad was the unlucky person to do the deed. It was about 3 AM and raining, so visibility was low. The guy was also wearing full black besides blue shoes. I ended up seeing his dash comp and boy was it rough. You couldn't really see the fact it was human afterwards. Stuff happened though and it really messed him for a while and still messes with his work. He wasn't able to drive on the highway for a bit. A former classmate of mine was driving late at night, intoxicated, and hit someone with her car. She thought she had just hit a deer and kept going. When she found out about the guy's death, she put 2 and 2 together and turned herself in, plead guilty, and I think did a year or 18 months in jail. Seems to be doing okay now, but damn. It wasn't me. It was my dad a few years before I was born. He was a truck driver, and one late night, while he was doing his normal drive between Sydney and Brisbane, a car coming in the opposite direction failed to make a turn. The driver was close to his destination and had likely decided to continue driving despite being tired. My dad had nearly 80 ton worth of truck going 100 kilometers per hour. He couldn't do anything. The car went under the front of his truck. The driver and his passenger were killed immediately. The passenger's 3 children in the back were pinned, but alive and awake and screaming. Being the early 90s, my dad had to run for the nearest house to get help. When he reached a farmhouse, he got them to call emergency. He couldn't bring himself to return to the scene of the accident. The screaming was already haunting him. From that point on, my dad couldn't handle the sound of children crying. It broke my family. The actions of one idiot who didn't take a ducking nap. My dad still had to drive that route several times a week. I remember watching him grip the steering wheel so tight every time he approached that corner. Don't drive tired. We just turned left at an intersection when the car in front of me wanted to turn right into a convenience store parking lot. The problem was a truck was blocking the entranceway due to the snow, so he came to a sudden stop, so I rear-ended him. It was an older gentleman with his wife. They both seemed fine and were raging at the truck who took off. I ended up being charged for following too close. About a month and a half later, I get a letter saying the guy's estate is suing me for causing his death. I sent it to my insurance company who settled the case. I was not allowed to see any of the case files. From what people told me, he was a smoker, so he wasn't in the best of health already. I'm still not sure how to feel about the whole thing. I kind of wish it had went to trial, so I could have closure one way or the other. Rock climbing in Nevada. I was securing the line, paused to sneeze. My friend prematurely switched lines without me giving him the thumbs up. He fell over 100 feet. I haven't climbed since. I was 18. I'm 51 now. Not me, but my father-in-law. He was at home with his girlfriend when a young guy high on something broke into their place through a window. While his girlfriend called the cops, my father-in-law held him and pinned him down until the police arrived. The intruder ended up dying from a combination of the drugs and a few other factors. Father-in-law was charged with murder, but the charges were all eventually dropped. It messed him up for life. He never got over the guilt and ended up passing away from an overdose himself a decade later, leaving 6 young kids behind. I've had my best friend drive my moped. It was way too fast for him, and he was drunk. He drove full throttle into a overseas container. I should have never given him the bike. It's been a rough couple of years after that, but I'm okay now. My uncle was driving home from work a couple of years ago on a county road and hit a little boy who ran out in front of him before he could stop. The little boy was following his grandpa across the street to check the mail. 100% on the family, who weren't watching the little boy. Of course the Facebook brigade tried to blame my uncle and there were unfounded claims he was texting and driving. I'll never forget the sounds that came from my uncle when he found out the boy died. Absolutely devastating. Thankfully, he didn't fall back into his old bad habits after this happened. I lost my first girlfriend a few years ago to suicide. I don't wholly blame myself for it anymore, but I still feel responsible. I still think I could have done more. I failed to be there for her when she needed me most. As a result, the way I view and manage relationships has changed. It's made me more openly expressive in how I feel towards friends, but I don't allow myself to have deeper relationships than that. I don't think I killed her, but my inability to see the signs and lack of maturity did. Let me just say, if you're homeless or lost, never, ever sleep in a dumpster in an industrial park. No matter how cold it is outside. Find a doorway or something. These things usually get emptied very early in the morning, when no one else is around. The driver will not hear you scream over the revving diesel engine as the forks lift the dumpster into the bin. The driver will not hear you scream when the compactor starts as the diesel engine is still revving to actuate the hydraulics. Not until the mechanism gets jammed and he has to step out to see what the problem is. Then he finds you half in and half out of the hopper, which is what caused the jam. Unfortunately, it also pretty much just cut you in half. Was on the way back from my honeymoon in the car with new wife and her dad. He was driving. It was 2 in the morning. Visibility was low. Out of nowhere a man seemed to literally just appear in the middle of the freeway lane. Hit him and he went over the truck. We pulled over to the side, gathered ourselves, and dad-in-law went to check the body. Before he got there, a semi hit the body, so no idea if he lived after the hit or not. We were just outside a gambling town, and we made up a story that he probably lost his money and wanted to end it all. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.